I think a $15 spider deck would be fun, but with as little changeling and shapeshifter as possible. So, Bob Gnarly wants spiders. I can give him spiders. Unfortunately, within the $15 budget level, though, we're actually really restrictive on spiders. We can go one of two routes. We can either build a deck that technically has 20 to 30 spiders, as a usual Tribal or Kindred deck would, or we can try to build a good deck, which is going to be a little harder if we're trying to stick with that spider restriction. So I've decided to split the difference between the two of those things. The deck does have spiders in it, and the spider commander is in fact going to be the focus, and there are plenty of ways of generating spider tokens in the deck as well, but we are not going full on Spider Kindred, as within this budget constriction, that just isn't really something we're able to do as easily. So let me introduce you to our commander today. This is Shelob, the Child of Ungoliant, and I got super excited when she came out because I really wanted to build Shelob as soon as I saw her, but I never actually took the time to build her because I just had a bunch of other decks that were taking all of my time. I was building Sauron at the time, for instance. I was building Dimir, Lord of Nazgul. Like, I was focused on all of that stuff, and so I didn't actually spend time building her. But this has given me a wonderful opportunity to actually focus on building her now. So what does she do? Well, she's a 6-mana 8/8 commander, which is that is massive on its own. And she's green, so we can hit that 6 mana really easily. She's got Death Touch and Ward 2, which is the more I talk about this commander, the more she feels kind of artificially power pushed. Then she gives all spiders we control Death Touch and Ward 2 as well. And now we're starting to get a little, just a lot of stuff is happening on this card already. And then if a spider we control deals damage and kills a creature, then the creature that it killed becomes a food token on our board with all of the abilities of that creature. And it's a copy of the creature with that, but it's not a creature. Again, this card's doing a lot. So what does this mean our deck is going to be doing? Well, as usual, we have a $15 deck. The deck is 15. The 99 of the deck is 15. The commander can be $1 or less. And our goal is to create a scenario where we are eating all of the cards on our opponent's turn and then turning them into resources for us to use. We also want to lean into that spider theme and that feeling of just grabbing people in a web and harming them. I'm going to fit more into the thematic side of things than anything else. And one of those things that we're going to be doing is, instead of trying to stick with Spider Kindred, we are going to try to go for the idea of a spider's venom kind of infecting your friends and turning them against you, and it being something that you cannot fix. There is no antidote for that. So we are going more into the theme of that. But first of all, we have a gigantic commander, 6 mana. So obviously we need to put in, Soul Ring and Mana Crypt and all kinds of stuff to pay for. I lied, we're in green. Stop using that as an excuse to play Mana Crypt in your decks when they're casual. Holy crap. Anyway, we have a 15-card ramp section, and the reason we have such a huge ramp section and the reason we have chosen many of the cards that I've chosen in here is because with a huge commander, we want a lot of our ramp spells to grab not 1 but 2 lands, because we need to be able to get to that 6 mana as fast as possible. So let's begin with Burnished Heart, a colorless creature that can sack itself to get 2 basic lands from your deck. The idea is you want to drop this on turn 2 or 3 and then crack it on turn 4, and then that commander should come out between turn 4 and 5 if you're using the Burnished Heart. 2 lands for it. It's a bit overcosted, but it is colorless, and you'll see that with the other ways we have to get lands in the deck, it shouldn't hurt us too terribly long in the long run. Then we have Circuitous Route, get 2 gates or, basic lands onto the battlefield tapped for 4 mana. Cultivate gets us 2 basic lands, 1 into our hand and 1 onto the board for 3 mana. Dawn Treader Elk can sack itself to get a land. Explore the Underdark will give us a basic land with the initiative, and then 2 basic lands onto the board. Farhaven Elf will get us a basic land when it comes onto the board. Font of Fertility is the green Wayfarer's Bauble. Sack it to get a land from the deck onto the battlefield. Path of the Animist will be a 4 mana to get 2 basic lands onto the battlefield, and then Will of the Planeswalkers if you choose to have that ability happen. Vastwood Surge, again, pay 4 mana to get 2 basic lands onto the battlefield. If we kick it, we can also put 2/1/1 counters on our commander so it can lethal easier. That's not going to happen too terribly much, but it's an option we have access to if we need to. Wood Elves can get us a dual-typed land as well when it comes onto the battlefield. Search for Tomorrow can get a basic land, and we can play it on turn 1 with its suspend cost. We also have a few other turn 1 plays. Utopia Sprawl and Wild Growth can attach to one of our lands to make it tap for double mana functionally, and Wayfarer's Bauble is, of course, Font of Fertility again. Lots of turn 1 drop on the board plays. You should be able to mulligan into this stuff. Ramping is super important in a deck like this, so please mulligan accordingly. Get your lands out. A lot of times people feel like certain decks don't work because they don't know how to mulligan into the proper hand for the deck. I need to make a video on mulliganing. Anyway, and then we finally have Rampant Growth, the basic, the silver standard of ramping. 2 mana, get a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and that is all that it does. Very, very simple, very, very easy, but we also need to be able to draw into the things the deck is going to want to do. I'll show you the strategies we're going for, but there's some very specific cards that synergize with our commander that we need and want. So, to facilitate getting to those, we have a 10-card draw engine with Ambitious Cost as a draw 3, lose 3, Ancient Cravings, a draw 3, lose 3, Feed the Infection, and Harmonize are all 4-mana draw 3 cards. Then we have Greed and Argual's Bloodfast. Both of them let us pay life to draw cards, as well as a little bit of mana. Argual's can flip to the Temple of Alcatraz, so we can start sacking creatures and gain life equal to their toughness. It's a way to double up on the gaining life from foods that we can do with our commander. Hostile Negotiations is just black or fiction. Just, hand an opponent 2 piles, door number 1, number 2. You get whichever one the opponent thinks you should get. Then we have Izani, a commander that I'm actually really excited to build around later. Izani, Center of the Web. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you can collect Evidence 4, which is, banishing cards until they hit 4 mana value in your graveyard. And if you do, create 2/2/1 black and green spider creature tokens with Menace. This card is not only a token generator for our deck to make spider tokens, but we can sack 4 tokens, including the food tokens we make with Shelob, to draw 2 cards and gain 2 life after surveilling 2. This is a fantastic card, and I'm not even gonna lie, there is a chance that this would make a very good Slime Against Humanity card, because surveilling slimes into the grave and then exiling them with her effect and then still gaining the benefits of Slime Against Humanity is a really, really good idea. Maybe that's a deck build I'll do later. Izani, Center of the Web, Slimes Against Humanity. But then we have Savvy Hunter. We can sack 2 foods to draw a card, and anytime it attacks or blocks, we get to create a food token. And of course, then we have Read the Bones. Scry 2, draw 2, lose 2 life. Now, we have, as any deck that I build is going to have a very substantial, at least 10-card draw engine, unless the commander has draw attached to it. But what are we trying to draw into? What are we trying to do? Well, if you remember, Shelob says that if any of our spiders deal damage to a thing and kill it, which they've all got Death Touch, so that's easy. If the thing dies, we get to make a token copy of that card, and it becomes a food artifact. That means the card's not a creature, so we are not amassing an army throughout the game here. But this does mean we need to incentivize our opponents to block our things. So how are we going to emulate the idea of a spider's web in this deck? How are we going to entrap people? Well, that's going to happen with our Block Me section. Every card in here has the exact same job. Make our opponents block our spiders, and then, of course, their cards will die as a result, beginning with the creme de la creme of this effect, Nemesis Mask. A 3-mana card that makes all creatures able to block the creature that you attach it to. They're forced to block it, and it equips for 3. So with this, we attach it to Shelob, and then we have up to 8 creatures that will all die because you only have to assign lethal damage with Death Touch. So we assign 1 damage to each creature that blocks Shelob, and then we get 8 food tokens as a result of that. And then even if Shelob dies, that's fine. We have such a high mana ramping in the deck, we can pay for her a few times even after she gets taken out of the game repeatedly. We are a green deck after all. Nemesis Mask will then generate us, up to 8 tokens in that combat, all the creatures that we're forced to block, and then, since they are our food, we gain all of their abilities for ourselves. Then we have Lure, which enchants a creature and gives it the same ability. Staun's Desire, which enchants the creature and gives it 2/2. And if 7 or more cards are in our graveyard, all creatures able to block the enchanted creature do so. Gift of Deity says if the creature is black, it gets Death Touch, and if it's green, it gets that Lure effect. Destined to Lead has the ability to give our commander Indestructible, and then give it via Aftermath, the all creatures able to block it do so. This card can do a lot of work in our deck because it works as a protection spell first and foremost. We can stop a board wipe from happening to us this way, stop targeted removal, and then later on we can get that Lure effect afterwards. So try to hold on to this one for when your commander is at threat. Then we have Roar of Challenge, just a 3 mana. All creatures that are able to block the creature do so. And then it gains indestructible if it has 4 or greater power, which of course our commander does. So this just gives our commander indestructible, and then it can board wipe somebody instantaneously and give us all of their creatures as food tokens. But you may be wondering, what are we doing with those food tokens? Like, obviously we can sack them for life, and that will help our draw engine that has a lot of life loss to draw cards effects. But no. I said we wanted to go with the theme of spiders, the idea of injecting our opponent's cards with a venom that turns them against them, and they cannot stop that from happening. So to facilitate that, we have an animation section, the cards that will animate our tokens on the board and turn them from food tokens into dangerous creatures, beginning with Alloy Animist. We can pay 4 and target non-creature artifact becomes a 4/4 artifact creature permanently. We pay 4, we turn one of our opponent's creatures that we have stolen and turned into food into a 4/4 artifact creature. And now suddenly we have the beginnings of that army. And this card comes down on turn 1. This thing is fantastic. Holy crap. Then we have Tough Cookie, does the exact same thing, but for 3 mana, and we pay 2 mana for it to get it on the board. We can also sack it to gain 3 life because it is a food in and of itself. And when it enters the battlefield, it makes a food token as well, which can help us with life gain and token count. Then we have Toy Maker. Discard any card from our hand. Target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature until the end of the turn. So we just go ahead and discard any of our things we don't need at all. Usually a basic land because our ramp package is high. And then suddenly we get to animate something until the end of the turn. Then we have Ashnod's Transmogrant. We can sacrifice it to go ahead and put a 1/1 counter on a non-creature artifact and then animate it permanently. Lifecrafter Awakening, another way to animate a creature permanently by putting 1/1 counters on it. Note, this does stack with the power and toughness the creature has. So when Shelob makes the foods, they actually have a power and toughness value. They just can't do anything with them until they become creatures. They're much like vehicles in that way. So Lifecraft Awakening doesn't make a 0/0, or Lifecraft Awakening doesn't, make a 0/0 creature become an animated creature with 1/1 counters. If we take an Archon of Cruelty, who's like a 6/6, this is throwing 4 or 5 1/1 counters on the Archon. Now we've got a 10 or 11 Archon of Cruelty we've stolen from somebody to beat them in the face repeatedly with, especially if we steal something like a Galta from someone. Now we've got a 12/12 Trampler that it just stacked up with power. Then we have Tawnos' Tinkering, put 2 1/1 counters on a creature and reanimate it, or 1/1 counters on an artifact, creature, or land, and then untap it and animate it if it's an artifact. And then we have the strongest version of this effect in the deck, the Zenic Poltergeist. We can just tap it to animate a non-artifact creature, and then it gains power. It gets power and toughness equal to its casting cost. Now, when you make a token copy of a creature, token copies maintain all of the values that the card had originally, and that includes its converted mana cost. So Zenic Poltergeist will animate a token that we have stolen from our opponent, and then if it's an Archon of Cruelty, that's now an 8/8 Archon of Cruelty instead of a 6/6 Archon of Cruelty, because those are the converted mana values of the Zenic Poltergeist. Tokens generally do not have a mana value, unless, of course, they are token copies, in which case they retain all of the printed values on the card, and we are going to abuse that with Zenic Poltergeist. We also have one way to protect our commander if we need it, Swiftfoot Boots. We also want this because it gives our commander haste. We want our commander to be able to hop on the board, immediately swing into somebody, steal all of their stuff, and then we get to move on with our lives, and we want our commander to avoid targeted removal. So we have this and the instant Indestructible as ways of keeping our commander from biting the dust. But we also need to take out our opponent's cards as well. So to facilitate that, not only do we have all of the cards that make our commander steal all of our opponent's creatures, but we have a spider-centric not reanimation package, a removal package here, beginning with Bite Down. We can let Shelob bite down on a creature, and then that creature is considered to have been dealt damage from Shelob or any of our spiders. That, of course, means that Death Touch will occur, and the creature will die no matter what. And then we get our token copy of it as well. Cosmic Hunger is doing the same thing for us. Holtai's Final Strike is doing that for us as well. Hunter's Edge is doing that for us. Rabid Bite is doing that for us. All of these are doing the same thing. Grim Contest is giving us a fight spell. All of these will trigger our commander's ability. Then we have Ettercap. It can, for 3 mana, it can blow up any creature with flying, which can be very useful as we don't have a lot of reach, and spiders are generally very good at sniping flying creatures out of the air. It's been a thematic thing with spiders for basically since the first 1/3 or 2/4 green spider was dropped into Magic the Gathering. We can also play it later as a creature with reach, which has 2/5, which is certainly fine, but then it has 2/5 and death touch and reach because it is a spider like our commander is. Feed the Swarm can blow up a creature or an enchantment. Meteor Golem, we are a big mana deck, so it's easy to cast Meteor Golem to blow up anything that we might need to. Return to Nature can blow up an artifact creature, an artifact, enchantment, or get rid of something from a graveyard at instant speed. Speaking of graveyard removal, Shelob the Dreadweaver. We have the other version of Shelob in the deck. She acts as a Dauthi Voidwalker. Anytime a non-creature an opponent controls dies, we can exile it, and then we can put a creature that is exiled with her ability onto the battlefield under our control with this. This is functionally the lieutenant of our commander, as Shelob herself has a dies trigger, and the black Shelob is a replacement effect for the dies trigger. So if our Shelob is not available, this Shelob will be performing the same duties as the original Shelob, but if you have them both on the board, they do have counter synergy with one another, so please be wary of that. Then we have Putrefy, which has the ability of blowing up an artifact or a creature. Skyfisher Spider, which can blow up anything on the board, but we have to sacrifice one of our own cards when it comes onto the battlefield. We have to sacrifice a creature, and then we can blow up any non-land permanent with it. But of course, then it is a reaching spider that benefits from our commander's ability. And then we have Wolf Hunter's Quiver. It's a hefty equip cost. We equip it for 5, but then we can tap our commander at any point, and it will deal 1 damage to any creature or player. This means our commander with Death Touch will be able to just snipe anything we want off the board and then create token copies of them. Note, because we are sniping creatures off the board and creating token copies of them, this means that we can steal our opponent's commanders easily with this effect. Normally, that's a harder thing to do. Like, Shelob Dreadweaver cannot steal commanders that easily, because as a commander gets exiled with her effect, they can do the zone movement ability, where the commander can go back into the command zone instead. So cards like Shelob Dreadweaver cannot steal our opponent's commanders. But with Wolf Hunter Quiver, we can steal commanders because we are killing them, throwing them to the graveyard. Whatever they choose to do with them afterwards doesn't matter, because we make a token copy of them. So this card is doing a ton of work in our deck, as any card that we are playing in a deck should. Then we have, of course, our token generation section, everything that either generates tokens or gives us some other benefit for tokens. Beginning with Arasta of the Endless Web, a spider creature that says anytime an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, we make a 1/2 spider creature token with reach. More and more ways to generate spider tokens along with Izani. Then we have Birthing Bowels, the one changeling I will put in the deck because it does generate 2/2 shapeshifter changeling tokens, which of course are spiders as far as our Shelob is concerned. Then we have Spider Spawning, a sorcery that will make a 1/2 green spider for every creature card in our graveyard. The deck has a low count of 20, but we don't need to make many spider creatures with this for it to be a problem, especially since the card has flashback. We also have Peregrine Took, a 3-mana creature that says if 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, create an additional food token instead. So this basically doubles up all of the food that our commander creates, and then we can sack 3 foods to draw a card with Took. So this doubles up all of our food generation. But because we are generating so many tokens in the deck, we still need a win con. We've talked about stealing all of our opponent's shit and how we are going to benefit from that. How do we actually win the game? Well, let's go ahead and look at our win con section. There was a request for me to make a Finn the Fangbearer deck, and I'm not going to be doing that. Instead, we'll be putting Finn the Fangbearer in the Shelob deck. So Finn has Death Touch, and if a creature we control with Death Touch deals combat damage to a player, they get 2 poison counters. So here's how this is going to work. Let's say Spider Spawning makes you 4 or 5 spider tokens. That's a pretty low amount for late in the game, but it's perfectly reasonable. Those spider tokens all have Death Touch because of our commander. Our commander now has the Nemesis Mask attached to it, as it should, so everything that is on our opponent's control that can block must block our commander. The spiders are now unblocked, and because they have Death Touch, they will put 2 poison counters on our opponent and poison them to death, as a spider can, once they make contact with our opponent. This is an instant way to win the game off the back of Shelob's ability. But let's say that we don't have the spider tokens to make Finn the Fangbearer do his job, or let's say that we can't even win via combat damage because there's something like a glacial chasm out. Then we have the alternative strategy. Mirkwood Bat says when you make a token or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. Seems pretty easy to do in this deck. Disciple of the Vault. Whenever an artifact's put into a graveyard from play, target opponent loses 1 life. Nadir Nightblade. If a token leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Agent of the Iron Throne. If an artifact or creature is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. Every single one of these cards will mean that anytime our foods, which are artifacts, are destroyed or sacrificed, or we crash them into our opponent by animating them, however it happens, every single one of these cards will generate damage on our opponents or make them lose life, and that flexibility is very important. We may be a combat and stealing centric deck, but we do want an alternative win con that is burn damage as well. Disciple of the Vault also does some extra work here because he says anytime an artifact is put into a graveyard from play, so he actually can benefit from, like, an opponent cracks a command sphere, now I can make that opponent lose a life for the audacity of trying to draw cards in their deck. So never forget that Disciple of the Vault does that as well. But we do have to talk about the land section, and it's a very, very brief one because this is such a basic land-heavy deck. 18 forests, 13 swamps, 2 dual lands, just Command Tower and Haunted Mire, and then the fetching land section, Shire Terrace, Promising Vein, and Jund Panorama all can grab lands while being untapped lands, and Myriad Landscape can grab 2 lands from the deck, put them on the battlefield untapped. So very, very easy section of the deck itself. The deck doesn't require board wipes per se because the commander is facilitating board wipes throughout the process of you playing the deck. And that is Shelob, Child of Ungoliant. But what if you wanted to take this deck a little further? Well, there's 2 avenues you could take it. You could go the actual Spider Tribal route, or you could go and lean into the food token animation. I would suggest keeping the split down the middle. So in a fuller power version of the deck, maybe we would only keep the repeatable animation cards like Zenek Poltergeist, Alloy Animist, Tough Cookie, Toymaker, and we would nix these ones in favor of Spider token generation like Arachnogenesis. That would be a very good one to put in here. The Block Me section would largely remain the same. This is the same style of Block Me section that I use in my Thalia and Gitrog monster deck for the same reasons. Gift of the Deity is the one I would probably drop down and try to find a more mana efficient way of doing that effect, but generally speaking, this effect is very few and far between. Our draw section, if I'm being honest, we could put in a Deadly Dispute here. All of the 4 mana draw spells can be replaced with cards like Deadly Dispute and Costly Plunder, cards that sack a thing that we're generating anyway to just draw extra cards. They are better and more mana efficient, and cards like Deadly Dispute do tend to not make it into my budget decks because they cost more money than is reliable. In the protection section, I would just double up, give it a Lightning Greaves on top of the Swiftfoot Boots, because you don't need to really target Shelob that much outside of your removal section, so that's what I would end up doing. The ramp section, I would keep mostly the same, with a couple of exceptions. Maybe go ahead and trade out things like Burnished Heart for Mana Dorks, and trade out things like Vastwood Surge for Skyshroud Claim, and of course putting in an Arcane Signet and a Soul Ring will help as well in terms of just cards that act as 1 card but give you 2 mana. Anything like that works really well in here. As for the removal section, I would definitely throw a Beast Within in here. I would very, very quickly get a Beast Within in here, especially if you're adding Lightning Greaves in the deck, and we can't use as many of these like Hultai's Final Strike style cards, because once you start putting in more Shroud in the deck, this targeted removal that targets a commander to do its effect doesn't work anymore. So Beast Within would need to go in here. I would definitely put in like Bitter Triumph because it can blow up Planeswalkers, and this deck in the budget form is lacking that kind of ability. And then of course, adding in maybe a couple edict type effects like Fleshbag Marauder wouldn't be horrible as well because they can keep people on the back foot. Also, I would double up on the Wolf Hunter's Quiver ability by adding in a Viridian Longbow to the deck, as the Viridian Longbow has the ability of Wolf Hunter's Quiver for 2 mana less. So I run them both when I'm playing decks like Glissa, so I would definitely go and double up on that in here. As for Spider tokens, I already mentioned Arachnogenesis would go in here, and I would probably... It's hard to say. So I don't know if I would go down on anything in here. Not really. I'd probably keep all of these even in a full power version of the deck. Spider spawning, I would do some tests with to see if the full power version of the deck creature count is beneficial for it. In my estimations, though, in this version of the deck, spawning is going to give you 2 to 3 spider creature tokens the first time you cast it, and then the second time you cast it, probably about 5 or so. The win con section, you probably don't even need to change. It's already doing everything the deck wants to do. Finn wouldn't be replaced, Mirkwood wouldn't be replaced, Nadir and Agent wouldn't be replaced, and Disciple of the Vault wouldn't be replaced. They're all already doing exactly what the deck wants to do. You could, if you really wanted to lean in, add in things like, say, Creator Hoof Behemoth, if you wanted to animate all of your food and then turn it into just a bludgeoning ram against somebody. That is an option you have access to, but you don't necessarily have to take that. And then, of course, in the land section, it's just the obvious thing is here, adding in some more utility lands like a Reliquary Tower and a Grim Backwoods. And then, of course, getting more dual lands in the deck, getting a Shock land in, getting the Surveil land in. Any of your searchable ones would all go in, which also means, well, as you add more searchable lands into the deck, you can add Nature's Lore and Farseek and stuff into this ramping section too. But you don't want to put those in the deck until you have the dual lands in. So put in those dual lands once you know that you've got a Nature's Lore, a 3 Visits, a Farseek, a Sky Shroud claim. Once you know you've got those in hand and they need a home, then obviously you can go ahead and start putting the dual lands in here that are searchable. And that will help you a ton when you are building this particular deck. Otherwise, make sure you keep it as a deck that can protect Shelob, that can spawn spider tokens, and has a few ways of instantly winning, and make sure that you keep all of the mana acceleration that you can. Every single card that generates you 2 mana for, 3 or 4 mana invested is a good effect for this card. Hell, I would even go as far to say the Scepter from Scepter of Eternal Glory, the one from the Warhammer decks, should probably go in here as it generates 3 mana for the cost of 4. It's just a very go-again card. It doesn't hurt your turn at all. Maybe even a Gilded Lotus just to get you there, because you know this commander is going to get hit a handful of times. So that would be my suggestion for the deck upgrades, but otherwise, I hope you enjoyed. She is a fun commander that I've been very excited to build for the last year since the Lord of the Rings stuff came out, and I just hadn't found an excuse to build them, so thank you, Bob Gnarly, for giving me an excuse to build Shelob. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let me know what upgrades you would add to the deck, and let me know what direction you would take it in. As always, everybody, thank you all for watching, and insert end of video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Blitzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, Sagitt, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.